Let's talk about the death penalty and why it should happen a lot more often and a lot more swiftly than it currently does. Welcome back. It's been a while. I've been slacking a little bit with the podcast, but I have been on some other people's shows. If you are just one of the audio listeners, you might not know that I update my YouTube community feed whenever I go on somebody else's show and I share the link. I often share it on my social media pages if you follow me there. And I should share it on my Patreon more. So if you want to see that, or if you just want to subscribe to my Patreon to support the show, I want to know what I can do for my listeners. So please feel free, if you subscribe to my Patreon, to tell me what you want. If you want like a Q&A or private videos or something where I answer, the group, all the patrons' Q&As that I only release to Patreon supporters, that would be super cool. So let me know what you like. But also, I was on the Obro show where we talked about some of the cultural problems that I have talked a lot before about on the show. But specifically, an interesting twist on that. The host of the show that I spoke with, there's normally two guys, but only one guy was able to make it to the interview. But he was particularly interested in how we interact with the people who we disagree with about these issues. So that was a really interesting conversation. And then the second conversation I had more recently, just last week or a couple weeks ago, was with Lucas Curcio, who was on my podcast recently. He's a pastor and the host of Method Ministries podcast. And we talked about a recent pastor who I have talked a lot about and how people also shouldn't be platforming fake pastors, which has drawn the ire of a tremendous number of his bootlickers and supporters and the other people in those communities who are too cowardly. The big name people are too cowardly to say my name. But since when do fake pastors actually care about what the Bible says? So this is totally expected. And then all of their anonymous supporters who love to, follow their every beck and call, has sent me hundreds of comments about how I'm every slur under the sun, and it's great. It's actually really encouraging. I love seeing that because it tells me I'm right on the mark whenever I talk about stuff like that, and it gets all the hate from exactly the right people. So you could check those two episodes out, Method Ministries and the Obro Show. But anyway, let's get into the content of this episode where I am going to be talking about why the death penalty should happen way more often than it does, and far more swiftly. Now, there are different opinions on the death penalty. A lot of people, even with a good, strong conscience, has an issue with the death penalty. So I'm also going to talk about some of the criticisms of the death penalty, and I think how we should legally really approach what the death penalty is. And this is all in light of a recent horrible tragedy that happened that you might have heard about. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the tragedy and what happened, and also examples of not only how we should respond to tragedies like this when we hear about them, but how not to respond. And I'm going to give you examples of some large name influencers who are responding, I think, in a very unhelpful and awful way that we want to be sure not to get sucked into ourselves, even though it is tragic and it is infuriating, even for me, that things like this happen, even though I usually keep my cool. It's tragic. It's infuriating to see what happened. And then finally, I want to talk about some ways that we can prevent these things from happening either to us, or at least lower the likelihood of these things happening to us or our loved ones, making sure that we are well educated and prepared for situations like this, or be able to avoid situations like this altogether, ideally. So let's get into it. What exactly am I talking about? So there was a few days ago, there was a video started going around where there was a train in Charlotte, North Carolina, where there was a really sketchy looking black dude just sitting on the train. And right in front of him was a young lady, and the man, DeCarlos Brown Jr., he looked kind of sketchy, and he in the short clip of the video that we saw, he wasn't necessarily acting strange, but out of absolutely nowhere, he stands up and he stabs her in the neck, this girl in front of him who was just on her phone, He stabs her in the neck multiple times. And he gets up and walks out. Blood's everywhere. He gets up and walks away, and the entire time, not a single person does absolutely anything to help. And of course, later she died. Her name is Irina Zarutska. She fled Ukraine in the year 2022 with her mother, sister, and brother to escape the war in Russia. And DeCarlos Brown Jr., DeCarlos, was arrested at least 14 times in the past. This is the part that really gets me. He was arrested 14 times on account of felony larceny, robbery with a dangerous weapon, assault, shoplifting, making threats, and more. He was previously serving a 5-year sentence for robbery with a deadly weapon in the year 2014. And he was released in September of 2020 and was shortly arrested again for assaulting his sister at her home in Charlotte. Then, in January of 2025, he was arrested and released after being charged with misuse of the 911 emergency system, making fake emergency calls, in other words. His mother, at some point, got an involuntary commitment order from the courts, and Brown was later diagnosed with schizophrenia after being placed under psychiatric monitoring. So what an involuntary commitment order is basically a commitment order from the courts where somebody can be forcefully committed to a mental institution against their will. Normally people would commit themselves to mental institutions, but if somebody is crazy enough, you can get an involuntary commitment order, and then the police can forcibly take them to a mental institution for their own good. And his mother, said that he became homeless after she kicked him out of her home for being too aggressive. So he had a history of aggression. She even told the court that the court never should have let her son out in the community knowing that he had mental health issues and previous arrests. So even his mother knew better than this. And even local police interacted with Brown on 3 different occasions in the year 2024 and referenced him to various resources, although they have up until now refused to explain what those resources were. Now, and this is tragic. I don't recommend looking up this video. It's brutal, and I think it would only serve to, at least what it's doing for me. I have much better control of myself than a lot of seemingly these big name influencers who are going absolutely nuts. But it is making me really sad, and it's making me really angry. But I think the bad thing about this is that it's really hard to put our anger on a particular target. And that's why I think it's not very helpful to immerse ourselves in keeping up with every personal small detail or looking up all the videos of all these horrible things and tragedies, because it's not good for our souls. It just serves to make us sad and angry without giving us a proper target for that anger. And so what I want to do here is, take on watching that video for you. And I want to tell you where you should place your anger, because I think you should be angry and you should be sad. But there is a particular place where we should be putting our anger, and it's not exactly where you think. Our culture that we live in and the laws that we have allow for people like this to be free and people to do horrible atrocities without swift punishment. And that's why I think we need the death penalty. And we need it often, and we need it much more often and swift than it actually happens. Because here are some stats. So currently, over 2,100 people are on death row in the United States right now. Over 2,100 people. Now, if we have legal precedent and we have sufficient evidence to be able to put somebody to death, why would we need it to take so long to happen? Why would it need to take years? Often, people are on death row for decades before they're actually put to death, which means, let's just say, the poor girl, Irina Zarutska's family, let's say they pay taxes in America and let's say eventually maybe they become U.S. citizens. I don't know what the deal is. They might still be refugees. But whatever the deal is, Zarutska's family, possibly, definitely her American friends, are now and have been paying taxes to give the murderer of their daughter or sister or friend a comfortable life. And now, potentially, he will have a comfortable life for decades if he ever is even put to death for this, which he should be. And he should be put to death like today. Next week, tops. But probably it's going to take decades. And Irina's family and friends are going to be responsible for paying for this absolute monster, this animal, to be kept alive, live comfortably. They're going to pay for his meals. They're going to pay for his workout equipment at the prison. They're going to pay for absolutely everything for this guy who has contributed absolutely nothing to society, who has not been employed, who has not had a home, who has not paid taxes himself. And they're going to pay for his life because he's murdered somebody. So instead of punishing him for murder, we're giving this person a home and we're helping him to live for decades, potentially. That should not happen. It shouldn't happen. People who murder other people, especially people who murder other people, they should be justly killed. People who murder other people should be killed swiftly and without mercy, because they have given no mercy to someone else. And even biblically, the government has the authority, has the biblical authority. Now, the U.S. government doesn't like to do this. They don't like to, they love to punish people for things they shouldn't punish people for. And they reward people who they should be punishing. So this is exactly the opposite of what a biblical government should be doing. A biblical government should be rewarding good and punishing evil, but we see our government is doing exactly the opposite. And it is because we have had a long history of liberals and Democrats in office in cities creating evil laws that hate human life. That has caused the situation we're finding ourselves in, where something like this can happen and is allowed to happen, and where even a culture around it is created where multiple people can be sitting right around this and just have their heads down and completely ignore it. Even after he walks away, they don't help, they get up and walk away. That's what happened. Only much later does somebody get up and help her after it's far too late. I'm getting ahead of myself. There are lots of ways where I think this could have been prevented and other things that could be prevented. But first, I want to talk about some possible criticisms to the death penalty itself. I think obviously, hopefully, all of us can agree people like this should be put to death. But I think there are two major criticisms. And one criticism comes from hateful idiots. People who hate truth, people who hate life, people who have no care of human value whatsoever. And the other primary criticism of the death penalty actually comes from people, I think, with a conscience, people who do appreciate human life and want to be sure that we're not doing anything unjust. So the first criticism that I want to talk about is the one where well-meaning people with a conscience come in. They will often say, the only concern that I have about the death penalty is that I want to make absolutely sure that we are not unjustly killing somebody. So if we do, in the rare cases that we actually do have to enact the death penalty, the government, then we need to be absolutely sure that they actually committed the murder. And then after all that time it takes, after the decades, what if they apologize, or what if they feel sorry for it, or they're so separated from the crime, it's like the punishment doesn't even matter anymore. Like if if a kid does something bad and you want to send them to the corner, and you say, hey, I'm going to send you to the corner a month from now, the kid's just going to keep doing the bad stuff that he was doing. Punishing somebody a month from now has no actual help for the crime whatsoever. And so then at that point, even the people with a conscience, they're like, that guy, he did it so long ago, he's probably sorry now. It creates problems, and it creates problems for people with a conscience. But here's the problem. I think there are two ditches that we can fall into with the death penalty. We can possibly, and this has happened, we have unjustly put people to death in the past, multiple countries throughout history, because of the death penalty, because They thought they had evidence that somebody killed somebody, and they really didn't. And they were put to death unjustly, which means that the government was murdering somebody. They were murdering an innocent person. Now, the other ditch, here's the other ditch that we can fall into. We can lay off the death penalty, this is the ditch that we're currently in. We're not in the ditch, we're past the ditch. We've like jumped past the ditch into the ocean. We're off the cliff. So the other ditch is to completely be hands off with the death penalty and say, we need to be so careful about not punishing people who don't deserve it, that we need to take as much time as possible. We need to be able to reverse sentences if we're not sure about anything, or if it seems like the person is sorry, or whatever it is. We need to be able to reverse these sentences and or be so careful if we don't have proper evidence to not kill these innocent people. Then what that does is it allows actual murderers to survive. Now, between the two of those, I mean, I would personally rather not be a murderer than be a murderer, right? And so if I were, if we have like a trolley problem type situation here, and a potential murderer is on one track and then nobody is on the other track, I would much rather, flip the switch and have the train go on the normal track, because I don't really know if that's a murder or not. But here's what happens. Here's the thing that we have to consider that I think the people with this criticism often fail to consider. And it is, when we don't punish murder, it creates more murders. So in this case, and it's not a perfect world that we live in, and it is going to happen, hopefully rarely, that somebody is unjustly punished for a murder that they did not commit. However, when we don't punish murder swiftly, risking that we might accidentally punish somebody who doesn't deserve it, we will fail to punish murder and actually encourage it. We will encourage it on the other side, which is what's happening right now in our country. We are causing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands more deaths every year. Potentially tens of thousands of deaths every year, because we are not punishing murder justly and swiftly. If people knew, if I kill somebody and it's obvious and there's video footage and there's a confession and there's multiple witnesses, which there is in this case, we don't know if he's confessed, but he obviously did it. We know exactly who did it. We have multiple video footages. So we know exactly who did it. In a situation like this, if we know exactly who did it, this guy should not be alive tomorrow. That's how it ought to work. Now, the other criticism, I think, comes from hateful idiots. And it is a criticism at our worldview itself. And it is to say, usually, people who care about the death penalty, who also care about the value of human life, we also happen to be anti-abortion because we don't believe in the death of children. And so some hateful, evil idiots want to point out the presumed inconsistency of that. And they say, whoa, you're against abortion. You're pro-life. You can't be pro-life and pro-death penalty at the same time. You can't want to kill people and then also want to save people's lives. Therefore, you should be okay with abortion. Now what these evil idiots don't want is to say, okay, give me abortion and then I'll give you the death penalty. They don't want that. They just want to destroy your worldview. They want to say, no. We're going to remove the death penalty and also I'm going to kill your babies. That's what they actually want. So one, don't fall for this, because these are evil people who actually just love death. Now the second thing, the second problem with this is I don't like the distinction between pro-life and pro-choice. I think these are ultimately deceptive terms. I am pro-life. I love life. I love life so much that I want the government to justly kill people who take away other people's lives. That's how much I love life. But it allows for evil, wicked people to point out, to try to trap us. And just like pro-choice, I don't think that's a good term to use, because they're not actually pro-choice, because they don't care about the choice of the child you're murdering, right? They're not pro-choice at all. And in some cases, like in regards to the life of a murderer, I am not pro-murderer life. I'm pro-innocent life. And so we could say I'm pro-innocent life. I prefer to just say I am pro death penalty for capital offenses. I'm also anti-abortion. So I prefer to frame this in pro-abortion, anti-abortion, or just even better, that's kind of a euphemism. Let's just say pro-murder, anti-murder. Here's what it all boils down to, because really it's the same thing. I am anti-murder. I'm so anti-murder that I don't want babies murdered, and I don't want anybody else murdered. And when somebody is murdered, that murderer should die swiftly. Our government, who is supposed to, biblically speaking, as we are a Christian government, or we were, to wield the sword of justice to punish evil. And they're not doing that. They're not doing that. They're letting people like this roam free. And I have to pay for them for decades. And that's infuriating. Another thing I want us to consider. Speaking of the Bible, there is a verse that I think a lot of people know, and they usually apply it to things like dog attacks, dog bites. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The verse is Exodus 21:29. It says, "But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death." So notice, one thing, there's a couple things we can learn from this. One, an animal is only supposed to biblically be put to death if it kills somebody. There is no biblical command to put an animal to death if it merely gores somebody. I think to some extent, maybe that's up to the owner. But a lot of people think, oh, a dog bit a person, we got to kill it. That's not actually what the Bible says, and I don't necessarily think that that's a good thing to do. But secondly, what it does say is if an animal does kill somebody, after it is accustomed to injuring people numerous times, then actually it's the owner's responsibility. It's not just the animal's fault. The animal doesn't just get killed. The owner is essentially a murderer. The owner is treated as a murderer. The person responsible for that animal is a murderer. So let the reader understand. If an animal kills somebody who is accustomed to injuring people, and that animal is responsible, but also the person responsible for that animal is responsible for the death, how much more should we apply that to humans? I think this is an interesting thing to think about. Who, and I don't know that there's necessarily a good answer for this, and in this situation, I don't think justice will be served. Ultimately, justice will be served by God. God will punish everybody very justly, very fairly, and that's the thing that we have to have hope in, because people are evil and they're fallen and they don't do justice right ever. But we have to try. But in this case, I don't think full justice is ever going to be done. I certainly not whatever his stupid name is, DeCarlos. Certainly not DeCarlos is going to be put to death justly tomorrow, as soon as possible. It's not going to happen. But consider this. The Bible says that not only is the wicked, the murderer responsible for murdering, but also the people who allowed it to happen, who knew it was going to happen and then allowed it. Those people are also responsible. So I just want you to consider this. Who is responsible for creating this environment that we find ourselves in? Which politicians are responsible? Which influencers are responsible? I want to talk about some of that. Obviously, it's the left. You know, the Democrat cities are the ones where murder is through the roof. Cities with high gun control have a tremendous amount of gun violence and murders, and the Democrat, the liberal worldview is destroys whatever it touches. That's true. But also, a lot of people are relating this to something like George Floyd and turning this into some kind of white versus black thing. This is a tragedy that you should be infuriated no matter what your skin color is. I think the people who are turning this into a skin color thing, just like the people who tried to turn the George Floyd thing into a skin color thing, are massive, unbelievable idiots. They're beyond idiots. They are responsible for this in the same way that the leftists who created all this racial tension from the George Floyd thing are responsible. And people who consider themselves to be on the right are doing exactly the same thing. And that's infuriating. Because if we say that, if they want to say, hey, look at the left did this with the George Floyd thing. They turned a non-racial issue where there was somebody who was a violent criminal who was acting crazy and he died of a drug overdose, and they wanted to twist the story into saying that a policeman murdered him with his knee, even though he was dying actively of a drug overdose and not a knee on his neck. Those are the people responsible. That's what a lot of conservative influencers want to say, or people who call themselves conservative influencers. I'm a conservative. I'm an actual faithful conservative. I care about what the Bible says. I want to conserve truth. I want to conserve tradition. I want to conserve traditional American values. And I think it is true that it's possible that, it's absolutely true that our laws have been shaped by the fear and who we choose to put in prison and who we choose to turn into a public issue or not depends on the skin color of a person. A lot of news stations are not talking about this event because it doesn't fit the leftist narrative. A black man kills a young white woman who also happens to be a refugee. So if it were a white man killing a refugee, it'd be all over the leftist news, right? They'd be saying, "Oh, look at this, these evil white supremacy, yada yada, whatever." But it's a black man who's also happening to kill a refugee. So that also kind of doesn't fit the narrative, because a lot of the woke right psychopaths, they would say if it were like a white person killing a refugee, they'd be like, yeah, but the refugee shouldn't have been here anyway. That's probably how that would go. Do you see the partiality? Do you see the inconsistency? Here's the thing. When somebody unjustly dies and it becomes a national event, and if you see some tragedy happening right in front of you, and that's exactly what we're doing whenever we see this video on the internet, which again, I do not recommend that you look up because it'll just make you angry without having a target for that anger. And I'm going to talk about the target of that anger in just a moment. It'll just serve to make you angry. But when we see these things happen right in front of us, and we know they're happening all around us, and we see the statistic that there are 22,830 murders that happen in America last year alone, and only 2,100 people are on death row. When we see that stat, that should make us furious, and that should make us think, who is responsible for this? Who are the people responsible for making people afraid to sentence black people to death if they murder somebody? And who are the people who want to turn actual just tragedies, regardless of skin color, who cares, into racial issues to be able to oppress the people that you don't like, if they're black or white? If a black person unjustly is murdered by a police officer who is white, we should be infuriated. If there is a white person who is killed by a black person unjustly, we should equally be infuriated, because they are equally infuriating. It has nothing to do with the skin color. If it were a white guy who was sketchy and had crazy hair and he was wearing baggy clothes and he had his hood up and he was kind of rocking back and forth in his chair and he got up and stabbed an innocent girl looking at her cell phone with a knife 6 times in the neck, we should equally be infuriated, and it has nothing to do with skin color. However, because our culture has made this about skin color, has proliferated this skin color narrative over the past few years, we know that those people bear responsibility for letting people like this be free. Because it is entirely possible, and even if it didn't happen with this guy, it might have, but it happens in many other cases, that people are not they're not sentenced justly because the judge or the jury or whoever is involved is afraid, because I might lose my job, or I might get criticized because I justly sentenced this black guy to whatever. But the same thing can go the other way. So I'm going to give you some examples of some influencers who are having the absolute wrong response after I explain to you where exactly we should be putting our anger, we should be angry at this DeCarlos guy. He should be put to death. He should be put to death swiftly. And it's obvious that he did it. He should be put to death as soon as possible. And every day that he is not put to death and taxpayers have to pay for him to survive is an injustice. But I think the real place that our anger should be placed primarily, because, it's over. Whatever happens to DeCarlos is going to happen. It's over. The real place that we should be putting our anger is the people who create the environment that we're in. The politicians, the leftists, the people who hate human life, the people who want to racialize everything, the people who want to rile you up to be angry in order to push their racial narrative because they don't like black people, or in BLM's case, because they don't like white people. It's exactly the same thing. So let's see what some popular influencers have to say. We'll start with Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh has posted a lot about this. He did a couple of episodes about this, but one post in particular I think gives a good example of this. Matt Walsh calls himself a Catholic, and he posted a picture of the poor girl from the video footage, and he said, "This image provokes deep visceral rage in every father who sees it. I can't even fully articulate it. It's primal. We want scalps. We want heads on pikes." So this is the kind of narrative that's being pushed from a lot of quote-unquote conservative influencers right now. I've liked Matt Walsh a lot in the past, but also he says a lot of stupid stuff, especially recently. He seems to be going down this weird, just like a lot of other quote-unquote fake conservative influencers. For the audio listeners, I do a lot of air quotes when I say Christian or conservative with a lot of people these days, because a lot of people are just frauds. So Matt Walsh has said some good things in the past, but he seems to absolutely be participating in pushing this narrative of we need to get violent. We need to have, he said something like, we want people like this, we want everybody responsible, drug out on chains. We want suffering and torture and torment and stuff like that. But that's not the solution. The solution is just swift punishment. Torture is not biblical. Torture is not American. We don't want these people to suffer. We want them to be dead. That's the solution. We don't want murderers to be tormented publicly to tickle the psychotic sensibilities of the masses. What we want is justice. We don't want to feel good because somebody who caused suffering is suffering. We want people who are murderers to be justly executed. That's what we should want. And conservative, quote-unquote, influencers who are pushing this kind of thing, who want you to be violent and want you to be angry without actually pointing your anger towards positive change in your own life and in your communities, I think are exactly as responsible for the influencers and the politicians who pushed all the George Floyd stuff and created the fear of sentencing people to punishments for their crimes justly because of their skin color. They are equally as responsible. Let's look at another one. This is a much more small name person, but he has weaseled himself into the Christian sphere. His name is William Wolf. A lot of people who listen to my podcast might be familiar with him. He's a well-known sort of well-known, I guess, political and social subversive. He's weaseled his way into the Christian space, and he's posted Nazi propaganda, and he's also attempted to normalize racism over the past few months, just along with his Nazi propaganda that he very subversively posts, and some of it he deletes without apologizing or comment. Nasty dude. He's getting into the SBC, and he's trying to quote-unquote reform it, but also he doesn't actually hold to the Baptist faith and message. Just awful dude, and a lot of people are totally blind to people like William Wolf, because just like the leftists of the year 2020 and the big Eva people, the Christian people, they put on this face like, I'm so gentle and I'm a good guy, and so you have to believe me. They're wolves in sheep's clothing, in other words. That's the kind of person that William Wolf is, and God has even chosen to name people like William Wolf and Stephen Wolf, Wolf. How biblical is that? Names are important in the Bible. So anyway, William Wolf says, imagine caring about being called a racist after these past few days. Couldn't be me. This is pushing towards normalizing racism. Why is this about a black or a white thing? Why do these people want you to be angry? I want you to not watch the video, to be calm. I want you to not get riled up and just focus on making your life and your community better and influencing the laws in such a way to where this never happens again. That's what we should be doing. There's no need to get angry. Now, when you know that this stuff happens, you will get angry, and I think that's good to happen, but also you shouldn't let the sun set on your anger. You shouldn't stay angry. You shouldn't be angry because of somebody's skin color. You should be angry because of injustice happening. Anyway, let's continue. Steven Crowder, another quote-unquote conservative influencer, says, "White America." Oh, that's always a really good sign whenever we start off a post with a skin color. Because as if the whole point of the year 2020 with conservatives was telling people we should not care about skin color. Now all of a sudden, it's okay because it suits our narrative. So Steven Crowder, the idiot, says, "White America," or let me talk like Steven Crowder. "White America, you just found your George Floyd. Are we supposed to be more offended at George Floyd's situation than Irina's? Because I sure as hell am not. Irina didn't live a life harming those around her. She didn't choose to resist arrest. Irina chose to get on a train." Okay, why are we comparing this to George Floyd? I told you people were doing this. Why are people comparing this to George Floyd? Because they seem to want exactly what BLM wanted back in 2020. They want they want to oppress the black people. They want to destroy the black people, just like the black people wanted to destroy the white people. They want you to be angry. They want you riled up. They want to subversively convince you that certain people are evil based on the color of their skin and not the fact that they are schizophrenics wearing baggy clothes with crazy hair and they're homeless and they are holding knives in their pockets. That's what makes somebody a bad guy. It has nothing to do with their skin color. Why? White people, you have your George Floyd. How about human beings? Let's rally around this, both black people and white people and whatever color your skin is and however many brain cells you have, like Steven Crowder clearly has less than 3. No matter who you are, you should be infuriated by this if you're black or white. The George Floyd thing, no matter who you are, you should not have been infuriated by it because George Floyd was a criminal and and he was dying of a drug overdose. So the context of the thing matters. This has nothing to do with skin color. Watch out for the people who are making it about skin color. They're idiots. Pastors, and I bet you know who. Guess who? Those are the pastors who are trying to racialize this and are trying to rile you up and make you angry. Those are the people who are the enemies who are creating the situation that we're in. Don't be mad at black people. Be mad at the people who are manipulating you. They want you to hate black people like the evil people who are manipulating the black people to hate the white people. These pastors should be, biblically speaking, they should be exiled. Or if they're false teachers, and actually many of them are, I would say, or false prophets, they should be put to death. So that's something biblically, if we care about biblical death penalties, let's put fake pastors to death. I think, honestly, that would fix a lot of our problems in America. We should absolutely put fake pastors to death. Absolutely. We should, biblically. If we were in a Christian nation, what's funny, a lot of the people pushing quote-unquote Christian nationalism, disguising their tyranny and their love of wanting to oppress the people they disagree with. Now, I'm differentiating that from like actual Christians who call themselves nationalists, who just care about America, or who are just accepting the label that the left gives them of Christian nationalism. There's an enormous group, really the group that popularized it in the first place, who they actually love tyranny and they actually love racism and they actually think Hitler is a good guy. Those people who are pastors, biblically, they're false teachers. They should be put to death. Don't let those people tell you what the death penalty is, or even tell you what reality looks like, because they have no idea what they're talking about. Those are the people who we should be focusing our anger at, because those are the people who are creating the problem that we're finding ourselves in. And then, once we focus our anger at those people, let the anger go. Don't be angry. Because the best thing that you can do is to just play whatever small part you can play first to take any specks out of your own eye before you focus on the logs in somebody else's eye. If you go to a bad church, you can't be focusing on the fake pastors on the internet. You need to be focusing on getting your pastor out of the pulpit or finding a better church. That's what you need to be focusing on first. And if you are a bad father or a bad mother, before focusing on your pastor, you need to be focusing on the condition of your own soul. And you need to be focusing on becoming a better person and a better father. Now, finally, we're running long. I wanted to talk about how to avoid these kinds of situations in the first place. Really, it's easy. I mean, it's a tragedy. It's infuriating that this happens. Depending on the city you're in, you might, honestly, I'm being serious, you might just want to avoid public transportation. If you have a job where you, if you can't afford a car or whatever, or you're too far away from your job to bike, and you absolutely have to take public transportation, know that you're going to be there with a lot of other really sketchy people. Sketchy people who are typically poorer or irresponsible. They take public transportation, and that's just the situation we have found ourselves in because the government wants to give free transportation to people, and that encourages irresponsibility. It does. And so if you are a good person, finding yourselves in a situation where you're taking public transportation, if it's a train or whatever, notoriously subways and trains and buses are full of really shady people. Avoid them if you can. Or any other, like avoid shady gas stations, whatever. Be as public as possible. Whenever you're in a place like this, be around other people. Sit next to other people. Sit next to the door if you can. Face the door. Even better, sit with your back against the wall or sit sideways so that you can see the people in front of you and behind you. Self-awareness is an enormously, massively important thing. It is the most important thing you can do to avoid situations like this in the first place. If you're in a restaurant or if no matter where you are, stand with your back to something so that you can see everything else in front of you. I usually try in restaurants to sit in the booth where I can see the majority of the restaurant or where I can see the front door, depending on where I'm sitting or what the best situation is. Also, if there were people around with guns who, with weapons, any kind of weapon, but preferably a gun, they might have been able to do something to protect this girl. So if you are a moral and good person and you have the capability of, or you have the desire, which we all should, to save people's lives, if you actually care about human life, you should train to carry a firearm and also have a backup because a firearm could jam. And so carry a knife along with your firearm. Somebody said on X, there's no such thing as gun-free zones. There's only a place where people don't carry their guns, or where like you refuse to. I forgot what he said. It sounded a lot cooler. But basically, if there's a sign on the train that's like, don't bring your gun in. I took a concealed carry class where they're like, and you can do this research yourself. I'm not telling you to break the law. But what I heard from my concealed carry class was there are special government notices with certain block letters that they have on actual government buildings. And those are legal notices to not take firearms, where it would be like a federal offense if you take a firearm there. But if something does not have that legal notice, then actually you can disobey the rule. And I mean, it's just like a preference. They're just telling you, oh, don't bring your firearm in here. But it's still legal. Like, you should carry a firearm if you're a decent person, as many places as possible. No, places with the least gun restrictions also happen to have the lowest crime. That's interesting. The places with the most gun control, which means the places where people have the least amount of access to guns, have the highest crime. That's interesting. Carry a knife as a backup to a gun, and Also have, I would say, have martial arts experience. If you're a man or a woman, I think it would really benefit you to have martial arts experience so you know what to do with your body, you know how to defend yourself. It also teaches you things like self-awareness. All of these things are tremendously important. The primary importance is self-awareness. Don't put yourself in situations, if at all possible, where you might be surrounded by dangerous people. That means public transportation. It means sketchy places, gas stations, streets at night, anything like that. Just don't put yourself in situations like that, especially if you're a woman, because you're more vulnerable in these situations, especially if you're young. And then if no matter who you are, be willing to protect other people in situations where they might find themselves in trouble. Because the other infuriating thing about that video was that nobody did anything to help. They just sat there and let it happen. Evil, wicked people. I think those people are also in part responsible for her death. Tragic. But don't let your anger build up over this. You can be angry, but don't let the sun set on it. Just let it go. Focus on making yourself a better person, your immediate community better, and then eventually, hopefully, without race riots or without psychopaths becoming exactly the same kinds of people that the left were in 2020 with the BLM riots and the George Floyd idiot crap. Don't be like them. Instead, we do it the right way, because the way to fix lawlessness is not more lawlessness. The way to fix insanity is not with insanity. The way to make the world a better place is not by making the world a worse place. It's by making it better. It's by caring about law, loving order, loving truth. That's what we have to do. And then by doing that, slowly, it's not glamorous. It has taken a tremendous amount of time for our nation to be as destroyed as it currently is. And it will take probably even more time to build it back up to something resembling a moral and upright nation. And that's what we have to start at now. And every time that we are mindlessly angry and start hating groups of people because the social media people tell us to, that is actually making everything worse. It's not making things better.